The history of my computing started with Acorn. Acorn Computers was a Cambridge company in the UK. It was
Ah,
massive in education in the 1980s because they got hooked up with the BBC, who were promoting computers for schools. And then they released the Archimedes um, late 80s, early 90s, and I was writing software games for that as a sort of hobby alongside my full-time professional work. It's an ARM machine. Acorn were with Apple invented the ARM chip, which obviously sits in everything now.
mhm.
So the legacy lives on. So back before ARM was a thing, really, I was working on assembler code on the ARM 2, which ran at 8 megahertz.
Oh, wow.
Way back in the day. So building computer games running at 8 megahertz, is you have to get your hands dirty at those sorts of speeds because nothing's going to happen generally.
That's
But I'm now running the same operating system on a Cortex, whatever it is, 20 or 28 or something at 1.5 gigahertz. It's just completely insanity using it.
yeah.
Everything's you click it and go, has it done anything? Like Windows will go off doing a load of stuff for no reason at all. You click it and you think, oh, have a look. Oh yeah, it's done something. So there's been a little bit of retro computing going on at the moment. It's good fun. It's just a hobby in the background, but there's a lot of things we've got as what we used to have as a business that have never been published, never been seen. So there's a lot of enthusiasts who collect all these old computer memorabilia things. So it's just been a bit of a hobby.
Wow.
It sort of taught me low-level systems. I mean, you were down even on the BBC. It was all about ports. It had analog ports and this port and that port. So at school, you could wire up you could get a breadboard and plug it in the back and do a load of electronics and write some software to read the levels and all this sort of stuff. So sort of computer design technology course at school was very hands-on electronics and stuff. So it's quite a grounding. And then we'll see in the business world, you learn very fast about infrastructure and uptime. And
To hear us both talk positively, look, you want to be in Bitcoin, you want to be in Ethereum. If you're not comfortable with, if you don't understand in depth the technology, if you can't explain to me how Ouroboros does consensus on Cardano, you shouldn't be more than 5% invested in Cardano. It's that simple, right? And so if you're just trying to you're just trying to make good returns, you need to stick with what we all know is successful. That's Bitcoin, that's Ethereum, and then talk about what the merits of these other projects are, and maybe why you should put some money into them and why you should study them and continue to be curious. But I think it'll be good for people to hear us kind of lay out a much more like logical and a non-maxi framework. Like there's no reason that you have to be all about Bitcoin or all about Ethereum or all about Polkadot or whatever. You can have a basket.
You have the zero sum thing that's everywhere, whether it's politics, whether it's investing, whether it's what people are, you're for us or against us thing. It's like, what are you talking about? There's all this stuff together is the way the world is. It's the way crypto is. There's a real narrative for Bitcoin that sort of makes sense. There's all the users sat in Ethereum. It's an enormous ecosystem. So that's the primary use case, an investing case there, is this is where most of the activity is. And that's the whole ecosystem, not the people have said you're comparing the Ethereum core development. And it's like, well, that goes fairly steadily. Well, of course it's going to, because you don't want to be publishing that every 5 minutes and blow it up. So they do that very steadily and controlled. But it's the ecosystem that's huge. But then you get from Polkadot and ADA and all these other projects that are sort of almost like queued up behind, are all developing and trying different ideas. They're trying different technology. They're trying different things, not necessarily with much real world sustainable income, but they're in that. You're almost like buying this. I see the whole crypto cycle like a shortened economic cycle. So it's like fast forward. So you're buying a whole bunch of like small cap VC style things that look good, and you would stick a small amount of your portfolio into those. Now, if you've got one like Cardano, you've done a lot of research on it, so you can put a bit more into that. That makes sense. But for me, I don't know that much about that. But I also see that it's not got an awful lot of usage. So there, for me, they're all in that stack that says even Polkadot, which is fairly mature, you go and look at how much income it gets. generates and how much usage there is of the blocks, it's pretty empty. So you go, okay, even the good proven technology that's been around a while is not getting that much adoption. That's not to say it can, but it isn't. So I treat that as speculative. That's all to say that's purely speculative, but it's going to pump like hell. So I've got an investment in Polkadot, and that's what's that up? 6, 7, 8x. It's at 12% stake. It's crazy. I probably at some point will pull it at some point back to Bitcoin and to Sats and Gwei, because that's where I want to be holding my bag, especially when things get really silly in the market. But that's my preference, because I'm saying, well, I'm trading everything else versus Sats and Gwei. That's my formula. Others might have a slightly different formula. That's great. And to say it's singular, going back to the point we were making, that's crazy. I mean, what you hear Peter McCormack, as great as he's a British guy, putting his podcast out, but his Bitcoin maximalism on what Bitcoin did at times is almost embarrassing. He talks about Bitcoin as if it's Ethereum, just casually, like you can program it. And even Michael Saylor's doing it now. He's saying, I can program Bitcoin to do something. I say, really? You can program Bitcoin, but that's like me and my assembler over here. That is really hard work. That's like
using your old Acorn, using your Acorn computers over there to run the new DeFi
Bitcoin. Type. Can you put a layer 2? You're putting an Ethereum layer 2 on Bitcoin, really, to do that.
Yeah.
But unlike Ethereum's layer 2, you haven't got anything in the layer 1. So you've got this slightly weird, everything's in layer 2 scenario to face. And there isn't like a Bitcoin VM and all those things that make up Ethereum. So you're sort of, and there aren't any developers. So what language are you going to put it in? It's like everyone's got this problem who isn't Ethereum right now, which is you've got to get over this hurdle of, it's like the Microsoft had this for years in technology, where you can come in and you can do something else. But if you go to look at the job list and everyone wants the same sort of technology, what are you going to choose to learn? So you've got this hurdle if you're anyone else. It takes me right back to the Acorn Computers thing, where Acorn had this market in education, which was great, but couldn't get any traction at all in business because the PC dominated. And so they got further and further and further behind in the end, because nobody was building for their ecosystem. So they were stuck in this space. We had all this great software to teach a 7-year-old something in school or whatever, but that all got ported to the PC in the end, and then the whole thing went away. And everyone's got that hurdle to jump over when they're new now, because there is so many people in that Solidity, the whole world that's there, that creates an entry barrier for everybody else. It's not whether the tech is better after a while. It just becomes a piece of, I've got a choice to make. I want to get into crypto. What do I learn? And he was listening to Mark Cuban on Bankless a few weeks ago saying the same thing. He said, I'm trying to understand this. So I started learning Solidity, and I'm going to build some smart contracts, and I'm just going to figure out what the heck this does so I know where to invest. And that, entry barriers for everybody there. And to say Bitcoin's going to suddenly come from nowhere as a programmable platform just because of its security, especially when ETH's switching to proof of stake, which kind of it puts a way bigger cost to attack the network in place, which is really what that's about, which is improving security first of all. And then you get the environmental benefit of not burning, even if it's all surplus power in the south of China, it sort of doesn't matter. You're still burning an awful lot of power. That Bitcoin gets left as this store of value narrative. And it's one concern I have with Bitcoin is if that's your only narrative, that's an awful lot easier to attack than having this enormous pile of applications and ecosystems. From your professional career, that's why there's still mainframes and mini systems and stuff. You try taking that out. That's the IT legacy.
Exactly. Once something gets ingrained, you can't kill it. It's like a cockroach. Once something becomes a dominant platform, it can lose its ability to produce returns in the market because people quit buying it. But from a technology replacement brownfield perspective, you can't kill it. It won't go away. It's like a cockroach. It won't die. And so to your point, but what I wonder is if people who say that believe, that aren't technology people, don't really understand that Bitcoin as a protocol cannot really possibly do smart contract. It just can't do it. It doesn't have, it's a one-way scripting language, no looping, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And script is just not built for smart contract. We'd have to fundamentally change everything about Bitcoin, and that's just not going to happen. I want
fundamental difference for people to understand, if no other, which is with the ZK roller, which would be ZK roller if you're British. The ZK roller is instant withdrawal, which is the big difference. Optimism can require a week to withdraw because it has to do all the the settling through quite a long validation process, and there will be secondary markets that are going to, for a small fee, get you out of that.
Yeah, you'll have derivatives on top of that.
That's the one fundamental difference to understand. And what's great in looping is you have to pay the gas to go back to layer one, but you pay your gas fee and you're straight back on layer one almost instantly. If you pay a fast transaction, in a minute you're out and you're in. So there's an exchange. This is a full-blown exchange, but it's also, you can swap and you can provide liquidity, which is your classic Uniswap piece, which is what I've used primarily for, more than doing limit orders. So
another thing I want to is just show here is I have the ability. So I'm on Ethereum, right? And this is basically this is tied to the Ethereum's mainnet, but I'm able to exchange wrapped Bitcoin, which is a derivative, a synthetic derivative of Bitcoin, right? It's tied 1-to-1 to Bitcoin, and US against USDT or USDC, a stable coin, right? So these markets exist today, and this is a small example, but this is the ability of me to exchange a Bitcoin derivative against a stable coin using a layer 2 scaling mechanism. So, the
synthetics is obviously the primary example where you see synthetic everything. And that's, already running on optimism. So there's a few things with layer 2 that are obviously key there. Fiat via the big centralized exchanges, it won't be long before you can simply withdraw directly to L2. So again, suddenly, those exchanges use a big amount of the block space at times on Ethereum. So, that's going to make a huge difference to the layer 1 on Ethereum, because people will just simply withdraw straight to L2, and you'll have the same wallet. You've still got MetaMask and on Chrome and whatever people use normally. You just go direct to L2. So that's going to be a big thing. And as you say, I think we're going to see more and more synthetic versions of assets, of all types, coming onto these exchanges. So you're starting to just eat away at the traditional financial markets, because once you're in there and you haven't got this layer 1 slightly clunky experience that has been there, where is your obstacle to trading on there? As long as there's some liquidity in the market, and that liquidity seems to be pouring in. If you look at the total amount of value locked into DeFi, that is like the parabolic up type.
And that's real.
DeFi Pulse isn't even all of it. It's not including every straight up.
So it's value locked in. It's just moving straight up. Now, a lot of this is synthetic assets. I think
there's so many things. I'm not. What I'm trying to do over time is increase my knowledge of what's actually possible with these DeFi protocols, because if you take a traditional bank, it sort of did that a long time ago in a relative sense in DeFi with some basic lending. You could put some collateral there, but there is like a 1,001 things you can do now in ways you can earn. So it's kind of, it's almost keeping up. The Twitter feed with all the updates from day on day is insane. If you imagine if you had your traditional bank's Twitter feed trying to update you on what they're doing new between today and yesterday, there's going to be like an empty space. Whereas when you get into DeFi, it's just every single day there's announcements on announcements on announcements of new ideas for how you can, particularly how you can earn. Because, earning interest against, getting a yield off of some asset that you hold is something you now really cannot do in traditional finance. It's zero. Stick it in the bank. I'm sure the US is the same as here. We're getting 0.01 in the bank.
Yeah, no, you can't put your money in the bank.
November. So
I've told people that. People ask me all the time, "What are you going to move into? Are you going to go into equities? Are you going to go into stocks?" I'm like, I don't know if the stock market's like blows up, you know, and it's on a parabolic up curve like you know, crypto is. I can't. I'm going to put my capital to work in whatever I think is going to give me the best return, and that's a day by day analysis. I mean, you know, in the case of like Bitcoin or gold cycles, that's more like a month by month analysis. But outside of like broader, you know, safe haven assets. You know, and crypto is certainly not a safe haven asset yet, even Bitcoin, but it's you know, it's relatively compared to some of the options or some crazy things you could be doing. But you know, when we get to the top, and hopefully, here's the thing: people are like, oh, when we sell out at the top, like you're making the assumption we're going to sell out at the top. Like it's going to be harder than you think to hold until you get there. I think people let's focus on not messing up holding to the top. Let's focus on that right now. Then I'll think about if I'm fortunate enough to actually have held through the top and made some smart trades and stacked some sats along the way. If I'm fortunate enough to do that, when I get to the top, like you said, I'm going to cash out the fiat. I'm going to take a little bit of time to just analyze and calm down. Because we've been working basically. You know, if you think about it, we're all going to get paid back for our time handsomely. But if you do it right. But we all put a lot of work into this. We're not going to get a good return because we just got lucky and we're fortunate and bought something. No, it's because we listened to good advice. We took that good advice. We did our own analysis. We put our capital to work somewhere that was going to give us a good return, and then we manage it appropriately. And so now we're rewarded for that. Now we can do the same thing again, right? So once you sell out, if you're fortunate enough to make it closely to the top.
There's no panic, is there, to just pile into something straight away. And I mean, for me, I think what's clear is there's loads of routes now to go to stable coins to then let yourself have a breath before you convert to fiat to here to there. You don't have to go all to Kraken and try and get the real currency out in a day.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that you can get with relying on Ethereum security. You can go to USDC. Things are going to be safe, and get yourself out of there as and when is sensible. And I also think there's some mileage in not trying to get out of the market when the sheep are trying to get out of the market. You might see, look, there is a point here where we're getting very close to the pi cross. All the signals are lining up. I'm going to go out a little bit early and make sure my exchange is working, because, you know, Ethereum's going to be at 50,000 gas at the point when you need to do this, because it's going to get insane. And then you've seen Kraken, Coinbase, Binance, these have all gone down at times during this bull run. You can imagine if we may look at that, you know, probably that's part of my strategy, maybe slightly different, which is fine. But yeah, I mean, as I said earlier on, I mean, I am going to be trading back to Gwei probably the most during this crazy cycle now, just because I'm already at over 50% of my portfolios in Bitcoin, and I'm happy with that. So I'm looking to stack that Ethereum up. And I'm also finding I mean, you said this, and I was focused on Bitcoin a lot more, but I'm finding the spiking is being a little easier to follow at times on the Ethereum pairs, in terms of I can see where it's going to reverse and this type of stuff. So I'm sort of looking at going, are we going to start seeing these 40% pump dump cycle against Ethereum? Well, if I can get anywhere near the top and bottom of that, then it is a great trade, which isn't too hard. You know, it's not some insane heat with some amazing penny stock trade, and it's halting all over the place. I'm thinking I don't want to go near that. I'm not good. DeFi to go to USDC for a load of it, because if I hold Ethereum, I can just issue a transaction immediately. I can use Loopring. I've got a fair bit of Ethereum over there. I can just go straight in. Their pairs are they've got quite a lot of liquidity around USDC to E. So again, in USDT, so I can just instantly just boom, I'm out of there.
Well, that's probably a really good idea. Thanks, Alan, so much for the time. This has been a fun chat.